Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles
from Valves and More, an online vintage tube store. And today, in Tube Lab number 119, we're going to talk a little bit about the 12AX7 tube, and we're actually going to listen to a couple. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. And we've made a major investment in new video gear as well as a new shotgun microphone. It was a goal of ours for a long time to improve our video quality.
And also our recording quality, and we've done that now, so let us know what you think in the comments.
So hopefully it works out well. Okay, so almost everyone needs 12AX7 tubes in their system. And most of you would prefer a vintage 12AX7. I know I would. Of all the tubes we sell, the number one demand is for the 12AX7. And for a lot of reasons, they're not often available. So why is that? Well, first of all, they are a high mu or gain tube. And that means that they're going to be automatically prone to being noisy. Why is that? Well, noise levels in tubes is a very linear thing. So if you have a low gain tube or a low mu tube, let's say you had a gain of 50, and you had compared that to a 12AX7, which has a mu or gain of 100, the lower number, the 50 mu tube, would be half the noise floor of the 12AX7. Now, that's just a general rule, right? So there will be some lower gain tubes that are noisier than a 12AX7 and some 12AX7s that are quieter than a lower gain tube.
But just all else being equal, if you have a higher mu, then you're going to have more noise because it's amplifying the noise that's present.
So when we do a live test on the 12AX7, a lot of them just are too noisy to sell. We don't keep tubes like that. We don't sell them in discount lots. We
toss them, and we have to toss a lot of them.
Yeah, so that becomes part of sort of the cost of the tube, unfortunately. So when you have a high loss rate in a high demand tube that's very expensive to buy in the first place, then it's not hard to see why the price of the tubes is quite expensive. The other thing is, this is a twin triode, right? There's two tubes inside one envelope, and that means we've got to get two tubes matching reasonably close. Now, the first section and the second section don't have to be precise in most circuits, but the next tube, if we're running a pair of 12AX7s, which is very common, one on the left side, one on the right-hand side, left channel, right channel, then the first section would want to match the first section of the next tube of the other channel, and the second the same. So that can work out quite well for matching purposes. And, and just electrically testing these tubes, a lot of them just fail. They're worn out, and of course we bin those as well. So that explains, and, probably the biggest reason why there are fewer 12AX7s available is that they just didn't make that many of them. They made maybe, 20, 50 times the number of 12AU7s than they did 12AX7s.
Well, the 12AUs were a much more general purpose tube. They were used for all sorts of things.
Basically everything or anything, right?
And the 12AX7 is it's a high gain, low signal amplifying tube, and that's what it was used for.
Yeah, and you could almost call it a specialized tube.
Definitely, yeah.
In audio, you see a lot of them in phono preamps.
And in the musician world, you'll see them a lot in guitar amps.
In the first stage, the high gain initial stage, which is essentially dealing with the same issue that a phono preamp is, which is taking a
very low signal and bringing it up to something reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now I have got some good news. We found a whole bunch of quality vintage 12AX7s and Jan 12AT7.
A very interesting one.
Yeah, and it's probably really a 12AX7. And we're going to have a quick look at them, and then we're going to do a live listen. Okay, well, let's start with the Jan, because this is such an interesting tube. So this is a Jan 12AT7 WC. And the higher the letter at the end, the later the production series, so W is really late, it's labeled Philips with the green label, but Philips bought Sylvania USA in about 1982, and this tube was made in the last days of the second tube era, just before probably the Sylvania plant was shut down. So this is really a Sylvania tube, and it's really quite beautiful. Have a look at this. Now, very few 12AT7s have a big flat plate, just like a 12AX7, but this one does. In fact, it's like a gunmetal black. It's really quite lovely. It's like a mirror finish. I don't know if you can catch that on camera. There it is. And most 12AT, not all, but most 12AT7 plates are a single wing. So basically half of this. This is essentially the way 12AX7s are built. Now, some 12AT7s sort of cheat, and they basically build them on the same plate framework that the company would use for the 12AX7s. That happens.
We've also seen some 6SL7s built that way too, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. And what leads me to believe that this may in fact have been a 12AX7, and they just rebranded it. It's a mil-spec tube, so it was a military contract. It's the whole reason why Philips bought Sylvania was to get their hands on those military contracts, which were probably pretty lucrative. And when we put this on the tester at the 12AT7 test setting, it pegged the needle.
Yeah, peg the meter right away.
So I set it up for the 12AX setting.
12AX7 setting.
I knew I was going to goof that one up too. And it pegged the meter again. So I turned it way down. I derated the setting by, it was about 25-30%. And finally I was able to test it. So on tubes like that, we put an H beside the number to let us know that we're using the derated number or the reduced sensitivity number.
Mm-hmm. Some tubes do have quite a range that they test in, but I don't think we've ever seen a 12AT7 test above a 12AX7 level.
So a whole bunch of these are in the store, and you're going to get to listen to them in just a minute. So you can decide, and I'm using them in a 12AX7 circuit, so you can decide how you like the sound. Now, we also got in some real 12AX7s. These are GEs. Let me see if I get the label up on camera for you. The interesting thing is they're all from 1960, which is unusual to find. This is what's called the long gray ladder plate. And the ladders are these little reinforcing ribs that they punch into them or stamp into them. And these are lovely tubes. And I've got enough to do quite a few matches. Gs are not as highly sought after as, let's say, a Mullard or an RCA, so they're more affordable. And we're going to listen to this one as well. And in the follower stage, we're going to use this tube. This is another GE. And let me just rotate it here so you can see it. And this is an organ grade tube. This is a Baldwin organ grade tube. And I'm going to talk a little bit about organ grade tubes in a minute. And this is a rock solid 12AU7. And a cathode follower is a very typical stage following a gain stage in a preamp. Almost everybody will build that way. And what a follower does, some people call it a buffer. That's really not a good name for it. What a CF stage would be a better way of calling it in brief or in short form. What it does is it gives you a low impedance output, so it can drive longer cables and it can easily drive the next stage. So that's not hard to see why you'll see a cathode follower stage following a gain stage, especially in a preamp. Okay, well,
I think it's time to listen to these tubes.
Okay, enjoy, and we'll see you in just a minute.
Thank you. I searched around, but couldn't find you. In your wild, wild garden, I will be. In your garden, under the magnolia tree. I felt you move somewhere beside me. I searched around, but couldn't find you. In your wild, wild garden, I will be. In your garden, under the magnolia tree.
Okay, wow. You know, Charles, that's the very first prototype preamp I ever designed and built.
And it sounded great.
I'm amazed. It's got a certain amount of clarity, and that's a good test bed for people to hear the actual tubes.
Well, clarity and detail. So we listened to both of these 12AX7s on there, and they both sounded fantastic.
Not both 12AX7s. One
Oh,
12
well, one 12AT7. I
That-
keep thinking of it as a 12AX.
that may be a 12AX7.
And, you know, while recording these tracks, we didn't have to adjust the levels at all for it. So that tells you everything you need to know about how much gain it's putting out.
That's right. We have a VU meter on each channel of our recording device, and they were roughly the same. So that gives you an idea that the 12AT7 is in fact outputting roughly the gain of the 12AX7.
And they're both incredibly low noise, too, and the detail was just fantastic on them.
Okay. And so what's happening over at Melotone Kits? Well, Charles is almost done the build series.
Almost done, working hard on it.
It's a lot of work, isn't it?
It really is.
And many of the test builders are right behind him. So
I can hear them, I can feel them breathing on my neck right now.
yeah, well, it did take us a little longer than we thought to get the series out. But anyways, but everybody's been great, and nobody has been complaining. So a big thank you to all our test builders
Thank you.
and their patience. But we should hopefully have some reviews soon, and that's what an amp designer lives for and dies by as well, may I add. So I'm always a little bit nervous as we approach the finish of the build. Okay, so let's take a look and see what came in this week.
We've got some more interesting tubes for you.
Yeah, okay, so set them up there, Charles, and I'll get these out of the road.
So, let's get these on screen. So, the first thing we've got here is something that is very interesting and a bit new to us as well. And let me see if I can rotate it so the label's on screen. Here we've got a GZ34 or 5AR4. I don't know if you can make that out there. It's not contrasting very well.
And it's the highest demand.
This is the highest demand rectifier out there. Everybody wants them. Everybody needs them. There weren't a lot of them produced. And this one we have never seen before. Obviously, it's RCA branded, but it has plates unlike any other version we've seen. But it does do something that we have seen before, which is called the Mullard flash, which is whenever you're lamping it, it does a sudden bright flash off the filament. And this one does it, although it doesn't look like a Mullard tube in any other way.
And the weird thing is I've never seen a rectifier have a little flash like that.
Yeah, another strange thing. But we found one of them. It's a nice looking tube. It's testing beautifully, and it's in the store if you're interested in it. We don't find a lot of 5AR4s, so there's not a lot in there. What else do we have here? Well, we were just looking at vintage 12AX7s, and this one's a bit interesting here. We've got Rogers on the box, and we've got Philips on the box, because just like with Sylvania, Philips bought Rogers in Canada and started selling tubes under their brand name. So here we have a new old stock Philips Blackburn produced, which means that this is actually a Mullard 12AX7 tube.
Oh, show the testing numbers, Charles.
Oh yeah, take a look at these testing numbers. It is testing quite well. 87, 81, which I think in the 80 to 90 range is new old stock for these tubes.
Yeah, and for a vintage tube, anywhere inside of 10% on the sections is considered to be good. 5% variation is considered to be perfect.
Mm-hmm. And just like this big rectifier right here, this guy has that Mullard flash whenever you lamp it. So there's a beautiful vintage new old stock 12AX7. And we've got another similar one here, another Philips tube, and another 12AX7. And in terms of build, it's almost identical to the last tube we were looking at. Actually, I think it probably is identical. The difference with this one is that it was made in a different plant. I don't know if I can show you the tube code on here. It's very faint on this one.
Let's try our new camera out and get it right up there on the focus.
Let's see.
See if it can do it.
Well, I've got to find it here first. It's pretty faint. Okay, it's right. Maybe... I don't know. I think we might be asking too much of it on this one. It's hard for me to even see it. But this one has the Philips codes on it. And the Philips code, the first character will always be the plant that it's made from or made in.
And which one is this? Is this the triangle or Blackburn?
So this has a little right angle triangle on it. And that means that it was made in the Heerlen plant in Holland.
And that was the main Philips plant.
Mm-hmm. So we actually have a number of these used tubes, but they're testing well. And they're in the store right now if you're interested in them.
So that first tube you showed us, let's go back to that. That was made in the Mullard Blackburn
exactly
in England, right?
So this one has a little B. Oh, let me get that on the frame.
Capital B.
Capital B on the Philips code here, and that tells us exactly where it was made.
Yeah, those Philips manufacture, all the Philips companies virtually, except for the later acquisitions just before the tube era ended, all have those codes. And you can find PDFs online with the codes all listed.
That detail everything. They'll tell you the year they were made, the week they were made, the plant, and also the revision number of the tube too.
Well, even the tube type is
exactly
normally on there.
Yep.
Yeah, which
so
can be useful.
Yeah, sometimes you can't read these labels, but if you can find the code on there, you can identify the type. And what's this last tube that we've got here?
Oh, yeah. That is an organ tube, another 12AU7. Now, this is a Sylvania 12AU7A made in the USA. And this is, let me get it up close so you can see. These little tiny slits you see where the tube is, plates are riveted together or pressed together, whatever you want to say. That's very typical. And the big up and down corrugations of the design, that's a Sylvania, but it's branded Kahn. And Kahn was a U.S. manufacturer of organs going way back, and that makes this an organ grade 12AU7. And now, why is that interesting and important, and why should we even, waste our time thinking about organ tubes? Nobody other than, old Hammonds, perhaps, is really interested too much in electric organs or tube organs anymore. Though back in the day, my grandparents were absolutely nuts about organs. That was their thing. People bought organ albums.
And before solid state circuits, they were all run by tubes.
Yep. And the very first, I think we had a Baldwin tube here.
Well, that's one of the 12A.
Oh, yeah, we had it up here somewhere. Anyways.
Here it is right here. Here's the Baldwin.
Yeah.
So there's another organ grade tube.
The very first Baldwin organ had 37 tubes in it. And that should let you know a little bit why we're interested in organ grade tubes, because the manufacturers needed low noise tubes. And they would set a specification. So they needed a certain level of noise, and probably what manufacturers did was they would just simply spot check their manufacturing and pull the very best tubes, the lowest noise, best testing, best section match tubes off the line, and those would become select grade or organ grade. Some manufacturers may have actually set out to make that very tube every time. Maybe they slowed the production line down, but however you look at it, most organ grade tubes are a cut above the rest, and there are other special quality tubes out there. Philips, for example, had a line of tubes called the SQ line. They were exactly the same as the regular line, but they were better in every way, so they probably were selected off the line as the best examples of what they were making. So, I've got a whole bunch of these in the store as well, and they would make great affordable 12AU7s. Okay, well, if you stayed to the very end, here's some discount codes to help you out. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to mention is that Charles spent most of the week going through a huge stash of 12AX7.
A whole bunch of 12AX7s. So we have, some of them are in the store now, like these Philips and Muller tubes, but more are getting added every day. So if you're looking for them, they're going to be in there.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for doing that, Charles. It's a big job. So we have flat rate shipping of $20 around the world, and if yours is $150 or more after discount, the shipping is on us, and we have some codes to help you out as well, and there's a secret code that's easy to figure out. People are getting this every day, and it's costing us some serious coin. And there's a code for those of you that spend the big bucks, and I'm not going to give you any more hints because that costs us a lot of money. Okay, everyone, stay safe, have fun. This is Jim
And Charles
from Valves and More signing off. Cheers, everyone.